Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait 1 or 2 minutes for everybody to join. Welcome to this webinar. Right, welcome everybody. We're going to wait 1 or 2 minutes more to ensure that everybody can join. Good afternoon, everybody. Almost there. People are joining. Right, I think we can start. It's 1:02. We're going to have a short webinar, but intense and extremely interesting. So grab your sandwich, grab your lunch, and stay with us for a good 55 minutes to speak about technology, artificial intelligence, and the child justice system, and the implication of those new technologies in children's rights. So welcome, I'm Cédric Foussard. I'm advocacy and global learning advisor at Terre des Hommes Foundation for the Access to Justice program. I am as well the coordinator of the Global Initiative on Justice with Children. And we are organizing this webinar, the first of a series of informative events that we will organize from now to September in the context of the I Access My Right project, which is a European project, a 2-year project that we are developing, and we will give you more information about the project in a few moments. And the launch of the policy brief on digitalization and children's rights in the justice system. So before to get into the content of this webinar, I wanted to give you some housekeeping rules or advices. The first, that you will have question available. You could use the chat for your question. We will have today 3 speakers with us, and at the end, please do not leave too quickly, as we will have a poll, and we would like to ask you to fill it live. But let me now introduce my 3 colleagues and speakers for today. We have Birgit Schipper, we have Valérie Verdout, and we have Dora Kiss. Hi, everybody. So we have 3 experts with us today. Birgit, she's a lecturer at the University of Strathclyde, the beautiful University of Strathclyde, and she's a researcher and she research on legal and ethical regulation of artificial intelligence in human rights compliance and biometric technology. And our focus, not the only one, but a strong focus of Birgit is to work on the facial recognition technology. And she will tell us a little bit more in a few minutes about the implication on child justice system. We are very happy to welcome as well Valérie. Valerie, she is from the Faculty of Law and Criminology of the University of Ghent. She focused on legal and fundamental rights question and the role of new media and technology. And she has a particular interest in the protection and participation of children online. Welcome, Valerie. And we have as well my dear colleague, Dora. Dora, she is a regional coordinator for this very interesting project, EU-funded project, iAccess project, that is led by TERDESOM with a bunch of European organizations. And Dora will tell us a little bit more about this project. But before to give you the floor, I wanted to say how happy I am that today we are finally launching as well our policy brief on technology and artificial intelligence in the child justice system. So the paper is launched today, and you will receive it in the next few hours or days in your mailbox. This paper came from the work we've been doing through the pandemic. So you remember that during the pandemic, the justice system from all over the world, not only in Europe, tried to adapt and adopt as well a digital tool. And the objective was to keep the wheel turning, and in particular through virtual courts. So all the work we've been doing during the pandemic brought us to the consideration about, are virtual court respecting in favor of children's rights? And that was a big question mark. So we decided to analyze these different advancements and check if they were inclusive and accessible to all, and especially for marginalized groups, and particularly for children with disabilities. We saw that this techno-solutionism and sometimes the uncritical embrace of technology can exacerbate existing disparities with our justice system. Attending different sessions with children who have been through virtual court, we have noticed that in a lot of contexts, they did not understand what was happening to them. They did not understand that what was happening was actually the court trial. And so we try to start to consider what are the consequences of using this technology in digital justice. The first element which brought our attention are coming from existing studies, like, for instance, a study from the Brennan Center in the United States, sorry for that, which showed that children who have been through virtual hearings are at a higher risk to end up in detention than children who have been through in-person trial. And this data is really important to underline. So we now clearly need to develop procedural safeguard for children in digital justice. And I will say that we need even to involve children and systemic child participation to ensure that those new technology respect as well the right of the child. So this policy brief that we will share with you will have two main focus. The first one is Zoom court and the court proceeding online. And the second one, which is much more linked to the webinar today, is the use of artificial intelligence in child justice system. But with that transition, I wanted to leave the floor now to my dear colleague Dori to introduce the iAccess project and perhaps to tell her a little bit more about where we are and where we're going. Dori, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cedric. Welcome, everybody. And we are super excited to be here. Let me share my slides because we have some prepared for today. A moment. Yeah, okay. So indeed, as Cedric mentioned, I'm super happy to be here and finally have a chance to introduce the iAccess project to a broader audience, because we have been working on this project for the past 1 year, but so many things needed to happen in the background that now is the time to actually come out with most of these. I will talk a bit about the consortium of the project and our objectives within the project. And afterwards, I will talk about a bit of the rationale and the background and actually where we are and what are the next steps. So I Access My Rights is a 2-year-long project funded by the European Commission. And the implementation of the project is taking place in 2023 and 2024. And the implementation is focused on Romania, Greece, and Bulgaria, while some of the results and the learnings of the project will, of course, be or hopefully be influencing a much broader territorial area. And the consortium is led by TERDÉZOM Hungary. The Hungarian office of TERDÉZOM serves as a regional hub for the European delegation. In Greece, the implementing partner is TERDÉZOM Hellas. In Romania, it's TERDÉZOM Romania. And in Bulgaria is the Institute of Social Activities and Practices, short is SAPI for that. We also have partners from different other European countries, such as the developers of this digital solution, Lorem.io from Belgium. We also have as academic partner KU Leuven and another technology company, Nodus, who is assisting the project with the user experience measurements in the project. During this 2-year intervention, our main goal is to explore the potential of AI to increase children's access to justice through providing them with tailored, age-appropriate, and child-friendly information, which helps them exercise their rights and empowers them to actually claim their rights and take on measures in order to be able to access justice. The rationale and the approach behind the project is coming from several different sources. So we conducted internal studies within TDH and realized that on a digital platform, age-appropriate, reliable, and child-friendly information is still not accessible for children. We also analyzed this from a different angle and saw that there are various chatbots available on the market in Europe, but only a little portion of that is focused on children and children's rights. And this does not cover the available support services in the countries. So based on that, and also identifying that this has been on the top of the agenda of the EU as well, because in the EU's e-justice action plans, it portrays that they want to explore the potential of chatbots and AI to educate children about their rights and potentially embed such a tool in the EU's e-justice portal. So in line with this, our project has 2 pillars. One is linked to the design and the development of this AI-driven solution. And the other one is to create some awareness and some discussion around this topic, because as Cedric mentioned at the beginning, we can see that digitalization and child-friendly principles within the justice system are luckily being implemented. But what we realize that there is a little intersection within these two. Therefore, the child-friendly principles are not always applied within this digitalization context. So we want to start a discussion around this and want to involve stakeholders and engage with them to also empower them to be able to build up this digitalization system with the mindset that it already implements child-friendly justice principles and children's rights. What I can say is that I think the strength of our project is that it is truly considers multi-stakeholder collaboration, because the project consortium itself builds up of child protection, child justice, and child rights experts from the on-field implementing organizations, while the technology companies are bringing their amazing tech expertise and solutions, and with the help of KU Leuven's amazing analysis of how to link these two together, how to actually implement our child rights considerations and accommodate them in this new technological context. We implement a child-centered approach. This is being done through our child advisory boards, who are an amazing group of children in Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece, and they are members of this Child Advisory Board, which is a collective child participation scheme. And this group of children are being consulted in every major decision that we make during this project, as well as being empowered to lead their own initiatives, to start thinking about this topic and come up with their own solution, what would be in their best interest. During the project, we also tried to implement the safety by design and default approach, which turns out to be the most challenging because of bringing together all these voices from the tech companies, but also from the child justice and child rights actors, because we need to figure out how to actually implement the principles that we are very familiar with in other contexts in a technological context. So for this, it is an amazing element of our project that we have the help of KU Leuven, who drafted a very robust legal and ethical strategy for us, identifying some of the major issues and proposing concrete measures on how to implement some mitigation measures to ensure that the children's rights are being respected within this environment as well. I will discuss this on the next slide. But during this analysis, of course, we encountered a few scenarios where we need to very cautiously balance a few rights of children. For example, in some cases, children express their need for the chatbot to have all this wide range of technical capabilities, while on the other hand, which is of course enhancing their participation, so they are being listened to, they are being asked what would be good for them in this tool, while on the other hand, the adults in the project can analyze that some of these technical requirements which children have may put their right to privacy in jeopardy or may actually cause harm to them. So in these cases, we need to balance their right to participation and their right to protection, and of course give a sound feedback to them and clearly explain why we decided on a different approach for some of the measures that they've been suggesting. And on the legal and ethical consideration front, I think most of you have probably encountered this many year process, which was around the drafting of the EU's AI Act. And this has been seriously influencing how our project is being implemented, because back when the project was drafted, the project proposal was written, there was no legally binding instrument in place regulating AI. And during the implementation, there has been all these EU level discussions and votes around the AI Act. And to be honest, this legal and ethical framework has been drafted for a while, but now with the new text added to the AI Act, we are updating it, and this will be launched very soon as well. But the legal and ethical framework and risk mitigation strategy covers, on one hand, of course, the AI Act, the GDPR principles, some ethical considerations, and as an overarching element, it analyzes how the principles of the UN Convention on the Rights of Child can be applied in these contexts. This document proposes very hands-on measures to actually keep us on track of how we can implement these principles in practice and avoid harming children. So when it comes to the next steps in the project, we are, of course, launching this great webinar series and hoping to generate some discussion around this topic, which seems to be quite new. We will enter into an extensive testing of the chatbot because the first version of the chatbot is actually ready now. So what we will do is that before we let children engage with it, we will conduct a lot of internal testing and test a bunch of scenarios with it in all the 3 languages, which I mentioned, Bulgarian, Romanian, and Greece, as well as in these 3 contexts. And during the testing, we will focus on the usability of the tool, the child friendliness of the tool, and content accuracy as well, because always the data set that these systems are trained on is one of the key elements of any AI system. And we want to make sure that every data that we enter into the system is reliable, it's validated, and only contains information that are useful and reliable for children. We will then pilot the tool in a real environment and measure our impact with that. And based on these testing phases, the chatbot will be iterated in order to come to the best product that we can deliver in this 2-year project. And after, in the meantime, children will also lead their own awareness campaigns. So the child advisory boards will create some creative materials and engage with other children to discuss topics on AI and children's rights. And in the meantime, in a local and regional level, we will engage with stakeholders, child justice experts, stakeholders from the justice sector to discuss what their thoughts are on digitalization and the adoption of child-friendly justice principles within this context. And I think this will, of course, take a lot of time in the upcoming 1 year, but it's been a super exciting year, and I'm really happy that we had a chance to bring together this webinar and launch this webinar series. You will find additional information about the project and our considerations linked to this chatbot in the policy brief, which we will share with you afterwards. And I think this concludes what I wanted to say about this project. So thank you, Cedric. I'm passing it on to you.
Thank you very much, Dora. This is indeed a very ambitious project, which is full of ethical consideration. So, being part of the team, I know the great job you're doing, and all the elements you have to take into account. I wanted to invite the participants to write any question if you have on the chat. But perhaps, Dora, if you want to share your email address, and if some of the participants are interested in receiving more information about the project, they can perhaps contact you directly. So, Valérie, perhaps we can start with you. Dora has been speaking about the role of children and above all the child participation component in this project. And you have a lot of activities about the children right impact assessment and the effect on digital environment, and in particular justice. So I wanted to know with you, Valérie, perhaps if you can tell us a little bit more about your work and then perhaps your findings.
Yes, sure, definitely. So first, I'm going to share 2 slides and to just set the scene a little bit, and I want to discuss children's rights in relation to new technologies a little bit more in detail, which, as you mentioned, that is my main research subject. And so from what Dora was also saying, we see that children are granted a whole range of rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and some rights are similar to those of adults, like the right to privacy or the right to freedom of expression. But others are also very specific, like the rights to development, the right to play, the right to protection from economic exploitation, and so on. And so we see that that policymakers and legislators, they are paying more and more attention at different levels, more and more attention to children's rights in the digital environment. So really specifically in relation to digital technologies. And most notably, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is the body that provides authoritative guidance on how to interpret the convention rights in new contexts. They have explicitly recognized that these rights also apply in relation to digital technologies, and actually that most of these rights are also impacted by the development and the deployment of new technologies. And so what is key about this convention is that it is a multidimensional instrument. And it does not only require that children need to be protected from harm and need to be protected from risks when they engage with new technologies, but that it also safeguards their rights to participation, freedom of expression, right to play and education, and so on. Let's say, so really to give them all kinds of opportunities, all the opportunities that they need for them to optimally develop, let's say. Unfortunately, we still see that discussions on children's rights online, that they focus mostly on protection aspects, and that the participative dimension of the convention and the rights that are linked to this dimension, that they are sometimes overlooked. And so one tool to really make sure that this whole range of children's rights is being addressed, is taken into account when, for instance, decisions are being made about children's use of technologies or children's interactions with technologies. This is a children's rights impact assessment, or a CRIA. So on the next slides, I'll tell you a bit more about this. And again, in this guidance document by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, this here the committee as a key requirement, so they provide us a clear recommendations for both state parties and the business industry on how to actually fulfill their obligations under the convention in a digital context in relation to new technologies. And this particular requirement, these children's rights impact assessments, they clearly pop up here. So we see that the UN Committee calls for these children's rights impact assessments, really for states to include this into legislation as an obligation for policymakers whenever they are making any decisions, whenever they are developing policies, plans, any actions, any budget allocations, and so on. There needs to be this requirement in national legislation. And so you'll find that some state parties already have this included in their national legislation. So it could also apply, of course, to the development of any sort of policies or tech in relation to the justice context. But also interestingly is that the committee does not only see this as an obligation for state parties, but also for the underlying that the business sector, so the tech industry, for instance, they have to undertake, or they need to be required by states to undertake these child rights impact assessment or child rights due diligence. And one way to do this is then a child rights impact assessment. So it's, in my view, it's a really interesting tool for all kinds of actors involved in making decisions that affect children's rights and well-being in a digital context. So it could also mean decisions related to the design of services, the design of products, the design of tools, for instance. So that's just as a primer to what I will also discuss later on, but happy to discuss.
Yes. Thank you very much, Valérie. I think we're going to have a little debate at the end, so I will directly give the floor to Birgit now. And Birgit, will be interesting due to the considering your work and research. Perhaps if you can bring us some elements around the facial recognition technology and perhaps that apply to predictive policing, which is some element that we have been considering as well in the policy paper that are going to be launched soon.
Yes, thanks very much. I'd be delighted to. But can I first of all thank the iAccess project, and especially Dora and Cedric for inviting me to speak today. And I also want to express my thanks to my colleagues at the Institute for Inspiring Children's Future at Strathclyde for putting me in contact with you. So thanks very much. So I want to speak a little bit to the topic of facial recognition technology, which is my area of interest. First of all, what is facial recognition technology? It's a biometric technology which, like other biometric technologies, such as measurement of heart rate or temperature or iris or hand movement, gestures, gait, measure physical and physiological characteristics which are unique to individual persons. And facial recognition technology operates or proceeds via the processing of personal data And the very reason that we have this capability today is because of significant advances in computing power and in developments in machine learning, which facilitate and propel the use and deployment of facial recognition technology. I think it's also important to provide a brief outline of the different types of facial recognition technology. We tend to speak of it in the singular when in fact there are different uses of this technology. There's first of all what we might call face verification, which many of us will be familiar with, going, for example, through passport controls at airports, where our facial images are assessed against the image, our facial image that's in our passport, and that has been transferred into a data bank. There is face identification, which is proclaims to have the capacity to identify individuals in a large crowd. So if you followed the news recently, for example, about concerts of Taylor Swift or Beyonce, you will have heard that facial recognition technology is being increasingly used at large events. And finally, and perhaps most controversially, there is face analysis or face categorization. You may have heard of emotion recognition technology, which is one aspect of face analysis. And face analysis and categorization proclaims to establish physiological and identity-based attributes such as gender or race, but also particular personal qualities such as attractiveness and sociability. And I think you can already guess, you can already imagine the many problems and the many concerns that this type of technology generates. So I talk about some of these when we get to the next slide. So I've listed here just a few concerns which emanate from facial recognition technology, ranging from the right to privacy to violations of the prohibition of discrimination, in particular in relation to faces that are perhaps from people with darker skins, but also women, but also, and connecting with Valerie's point about participation, interfering and potentially violating some of the rights that are considered the core civil and political rights, including freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought, conscience and religion. In addition to these convention rights, we have a set of new or newish rights which have been brought into existence through the emerging data protection regime, such as the right not to be subjected to a decision based solely on automated processing, Article 22 of the GDPR, but as all things GDPR, there are a whole series of exemptions which actually dilute what are potentially very promising approaches to rights protection. To the best of my knowledge, there is to date just one case which came before the European Court of Human Rights. This is the very recent Glukin versus Russia case, and in its judgment, the court declared that certainly as far as this particular case is concerned, the use of facial recognition is incompatible with the ideals and values of a democratic society governed by the rule of law. And I think this is a statement which, in my view, certainly, and as I put forward in my research, is applicable across the whole spectrum of FRT applications. So on the next slide, I map just a few points to what we should do about a technology which is proliferating at exponential pace. I think the key issue for me is that the design, the development, the deployment of facial recognition technology, as indeed all AI-propelled technologies, should be human rights compliant. And this human rights compliance should operate, or this principle of human rights compliance should operate across the whole technology life cycle. Facial recognition technology must be subjected to democratic but also legal accountability. There should be both ex-ante risk and impact assessments, including impact assessments that establish the effect that facial recognition technology has on society at large, not just on individuals. Where appropriate, and maybe we come to this in the Q&A, there should be moratoria on the deployment of facial recognition technology. And for me, the key point, or one of the key points, is that we need to shift the lens from an individual or individualistic perspective to the way that technologies such as FRT, facial recognition technology, impact on groups and communities and on society at large.
Thank you very much, Birgit. I don't know if I feel much more reassured now that I heard you. I knew that facial recognition technology was full of challenges, but the extension of the issues is mind-blowing. But we'll come back on that. I was wondering, Valérie, listening to you, and then with some elements that Birgit just brought now, in particular regarding the importance of human rights compliance and technology, etc. I was wondering, from the perspective of the child, the child right assessment, where do you think that affect, or where do you think it could be useful for child justice system?
Well, I mean, first of all, a children's rights impact assessment is important in any situation. So from the moment that decisions are made that affect children. So in my view, I think the justice context is let's say the textbook example of where such an assessment could be important. But maybe I'll tell you a little bit more also about what exactly is this CRIA that I'm talking about, and what is so specific about it. Maybe also compared to what Birgit was saying about the fundamental rights or human rights impact assessments. So a children's rights impact assessment is essentially a tool to realize children's rights in practice. And more practically speaking, it's this iterative process where the impact of a proposal or a policy or a design choice is systematically evaluated in relation to children's rights. And so for CRIAs, it's not that there is one kind of global template or example form. Let's say there are different methodologies that can be used to do such an assessment. But the common feature that all of these, the feature that they all have in common is the fact that they are underpinned by the children's rights framework. So children's rights and principles are really the framework which they rely upon. So it's underpinned by all the general principles of the convention: the right to non-discrimination, the best interests of the child principle, the right to development, the right to participation. And that's also a key distinct feature, let's say, of a children's rights impact assessment, is that the fact that they require actual involvement of children in the process. Now, I think in the justice context as well, what is really beneficial, or what the advantages of such a CRIA are that the fact that they promote transparency, because they assess potential consequences of technology, and also by reporting on it. That is one of the crucial stages also of this iterative process. So at the end of the assessment, you actually have a report on the assessment that you made, on the types of mitigation measures that you identify, that you recommend for implementation, also the way that you also an evaluation of how these measures have been implemented in the process. So it really creates transparency, which is clearly crucial in relation to a justice context. They also promote the visibility of children in the process, because I said it's really children taking part in the assessment, really making them part of the decision-making processes as well. It could also help duty bearers even to obtain dedicated resources in this context, just by promoting visibility. Ultimately, I think it also can help in the creation of child-friendly public services, child-friendly complaint mechanisms, and other systems of remedy. So I think they are really crucial. I mean, they're definitely a requirement from a children's rights perspective, but then they can also have, additional benefits, let's say, for the justice context specifically.
Yeah, this is clearly multi-sectorial, right? And it applies to digitalization of justice and other areas of justice system. But Birgit, something that Valérie said is she mentioned the child right framework, and the different elements that those new technologies should take into account, like specific rights. But from you gave already some example in your intervention about some risk. But I wanted to know perhaps if you can help us to visualize the kind of risk of threat that facial recognition can bring to children's rights, and which right in particular.
Yes, thanks, Cedric. It's impossible to identify a single right that is not affected by facial recognition technology. There has been much focus on privacy for very obvious reasons, but it does impact, for example, on the right to freedom of expression and assembly, and there is evidence in research to suggest that the use of facial recognition technology exercises a chill factor, which makes people more reluctant, for example, to participate in protest. And this applies in particular to young people, and especially to young people from ethnic minority background. So the London Ethics Policing Panel has undertaken work with young people from Black ethnic minority backgrounds, and they found clear evidence that those young people would be reluctant to, for example, attend public events if they knew that facial recognition technology would be used by police. There is the issue of consent. Facial recognition technology has been referred to as inconsentable. It is a technology that doesn't target individuals in a proportionate manner. Once a system is established, once the cameras are established and they are attached to facial recognition systems, they capture everybody's facial data, including those of children. So neither children nor, in fact, their guardians have the opportunity to consent to the processing of children's faces. There is the very murky issue of what then happens with the data once it's being collected and processed. The technological systems are typically provided for by private corporations, very often for public bodies such as the police, but also, and I think that's an issue that doesn't get enough attention, increasingly in sort of commercial settings, whether these are shopping centers, supermarkets, so places that children and young people also frequent, where they are exposed to this type of technology. So we are not fully aware in each and every instance when our faces are being scanned and processed, what is happening with the data, how long the data, for example, is being stored for, and whether this data is being shared with either law enforcement agencies if it's collected by commercial enterprises, whether it's shared with private corporations, whether it is shared even with agencies outside our respective jurisdictions. So it's a highly intrusive technology, which just to stress this point again, is not proportionate, cannot be applied in a proportionate way, and which is not consentable. We cannot give informed consent because we may not be aware where the technology is being used, and we may need to access, for example, services. There have been media reports, for example, of facial recognition technology being installed in schools, in canteens, school canteens, which certainly, in my view, is a completely inappropriate way of using this technology.
Now, it's very interesting what you say about public event. We are currently working as well on other topics, in particular climate justice and the non-criminalization of children, in particular involved in peaceful assembly. And what you say is clearly the risk for those fighting for our future, right? And you bring perfectly the risk they incur. But you know, speaking about children involved, we've been working for years and decades to try to bring the voice of the children and to ensure that they are part of our society, to, let's say, some people say, to empower children, even if I think they're already empowered. They don't need us. But speaking about child participation, perhaps, Valérie, this is always a big question. How can we ensure a meaningful child participation in this assessment process? I mean, we always have the goodwill, but to make it really useful and powerful, it's something else, right?
Yes, indeed. That's a good point. And I think sometimes, I mean, we have to be careful indeed that we do not just consult children for the sake of consultation and then not actually effectively doing something with their views, or not effectively taking them into account, or not developing these consultation exercises in a child-centered way. So I can share a bit of my own experiences from research, because in our research center, we regularly organize research, participatory research with children, so really workshops, consultation exercises, all these kinds of exercises, and where we really invite them to reflect on their rights, on how they interpret and on their own experiences in relation to the digital environment. But I think key for meaningful participation is, first of all, that again it has to be rights-based, and so it means that whenever you develop these kind of consultation or participatory exercises, they need to be informed again by children's rights. And what I mean with this is that you take the rights again of the convention as setting a qualitative requirements of qualitative benchmarks, let's say, for your participatory exercises. So, for instance, Article 12 of the Convention, which enshrines the right to be heard of children, it requires that children's views are given due weight in accordance with their age and their level of maturity. And so this links to also to an important children's rights principle, the principle of the evolving capacities of the child. And what this means is that, so in other words, if a child matures, their views should even have increasing weight. So something to keep in mind. Another example is, for instance, the right to freedom of expression. Essentially, it entails that that children should be able to express their opinion and their ideas in any form, so be it orally, in writing, in print, in the form of art, etc. So through any media of the child's choice, let's say. So in that sense, children should really be enabled as much as possible to choose their own way of expression. and I mean, many of the rights can have many more requirements. I'm thinking also the right to non-discrimination, for instance, and I think one of the comments in the chat also linked to that. But the right to non-discrimination requires that participation is inclusive, that you take specific efforts to reach those specific groups of children. It also links to what Birgit was saying about minority groups. And they may face specific challenges also to participation. That's again a requirement that you need to take into account in the design of your participation processes, of your consultation processes. So there are many requirements. So let's say for consultations to be, or for participation to be meaningful. And aside from that, also again, as I said, it's not just doing the participatory exercise. It also really there needs to be some kind of accountability afterwards. That it cannot just be a check the box exercise. You really need to show how you've actually taken into account the decisions, and how the decisions have informed your policy making, your decision making, and be transparent about it. Put it, as I said, in the reporting. That's why these children's rights impact assessments are so interesting. You can have it into your reports in a child-friendly way. Again, reporting in a child-friendly way.
I think there is always a fundament behind child participation. I think that we always need to recall that child participation has to be voluntary. You can't oblige a child to participate. You can support the participation, but you can't oblige. But to be able to do something voluntary, you need to give consent. And it brings me back to you, Birgit, when you say that we cannot give consent because there is no way we can be aware of all of that. So all of those elements you've been explaining around facial recognition. So I almost know your answer, so I'm not sure why I'm asking. But my question for you would be, should we go for a ban of facial recognition in Europe? And the negative side of my brain will say, if we don't get to that ban, then what we should do?
Yes, that's actually a really difficult question. My hunch is always to say that yes, we should go for a ban, but I am very conscious of the fact that this technology and other AI-propelled technologies are proliferating at such a pace that it's difficult to advocate for a ban. That there is perhaps we need a lot of public awareness to highlight and keep highlighting and keep emphasizing the effects of these technologies on people's rights, whether they can actually deliver what they promise to deliver. So does facial recognition technology actually recognize faces? No, it doesn't. It gives us a statistical approximation with all the accuracy concerns over race and gender that I briefly alluded to. Until such time, or in the absence of a ban, what I would like to see is a very tight regulation of its uses, including the kind of participation, beginning with the planning and design process that Valerie spoke about. So there is this movement around design justice, which should involve everybody who's actually affected by the technologies that we're discussing here. And let's be clear, we're not equally affected by these technologies, especially when we're discussing law enforcement. So some communities and some children are disproportionately subjected to state surveillance, to policing in comparison to others. That when the technology is used, that there should be very stringent oversight. and different legal frameworks having to operate together, from human rights law to data protection law to equality law. I also think that we need to have a conversation, a broader conversation, which goes beyond law. Yeah. That we need to have a political discussion which seeks to ascertain what these technologies actually deliver, yeah. Whether we actually need them, whether there are better ways of delivering public services, whether there are better ways, for example, to delivering public security and public safety, which is one of the key roles of law enforcement, whether we can look after our children much better than through technologies which are unproven, highly intrusive, and disproportionate in their effects.
Yes, thank you very much, Birgit, for those last words. I think there is commonly, since a few years now, a big misunderstood about what is efficiency of justice and public services. Public services are for the good of the people, not against them. And I think that some elements we need to bring back and come back to some basic on that, right? I would like to thank you, both of you, very much, Valérie and Birgit, for this discussion. It's been very interesting. And I will say that we're starting today this series of webinars. We will have a follow-up with a focus on the Artificial Intelligence Act, the EU one, and the implication on child justice. Then we will focus a little bit more on the development of that chatbot and the technical measures and the ethical elements as well. And we will finish certainly the last webinar on artificial intelligence and legal aid and legal representation, as this is a very interesting matter as well. All of that will be reflected as well in a new policy paper that will be developed through 2024. So stay tuned and stay with us and come back to the series of webinars. Before I release all of you, and I hope you had a nice lunch with us, I wanted to say that we have a very quick poll that my colleague is going to put on the chat. We would like to give you 1 or 2 minutes to answer and then to say goodbye. Thank you. Right. While you're answering the poll, I will close this webinar thanking my colleague Dora for the organization and wishing all of you a great day with, perhaps, I hope you will get more positive touch in your daily work. But it's food for soul, and it's better to be informed, is what we always say. No, we have to be informed to be able to consider solution for the adverse development of our society. Right, so I thank you all, and I say to the next time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.